Customer due diligence. My goodness. Small concept, big implications, especially under FICA these days. It's something that has really received a steroid injection over the last few years. This whole issue of customer due diligence. Germa, talk us through the basics first, please.
So I think the first thing that we need to consider is the change from know your client, who are they, ID and address, done, to customer due diligence. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? What are your objections? What lifestyle do you lead? Where do you earn your money? What do you want to spend and how and all of that? So it is just almost never ending when you talk about customer due diligence, because when do you stop? You do a media search on a client, if his name sounds familiar somehow. You Google him, you ask questions, you complete forms. Chris, do you have a solution for customer due diligence?
Well, I think that the solution starts with a proper understanding of what it is intended to do and what it means. For people who come out of the old pre-2017 regime, that was known as KYC. And KYC was this strict rules-based approach. You get an ID, you get a proof of address, you submit it and you forget about the rest, which is the tick box approach. So post this with the risk-based approach, KYC was no longer sufficient, because just knowing where your client lives and knowing that your client is who she or he purports to be, no longer adequate to compile a potential money laundering, terror financing or proliferation risk profile of your client.
I think that is the main difference, because not knowing who he is doesn't mean he's suspicious or a high risk. Correct. And now it changes.
Yes. So customer due diligence is the new format that every accountable institution has to do on every one of its clients. And customer due diligence includes the old KYC. So you still have to, and perhaps for ease of reference, let's distinguish. The requirement is that you must establish certain facts about your client, and those facts relate to identity, address, and all of those good things. And you must verify. And those are two distinguishable aspects of the same exercise. So you can establish by simply asking. The verification means that you have to adopt some process to check the veracity of the answer that you've been given. And in the past, the only way that you could do that is by getting certified copies of certain documents, or otherwise making copies yourself of the originals and that kind of thing. Under the risk-based approach, that requirement has been relaxed, in the sense that it says when you verify, you must still verify, but when you verify, okay, you must obtain reasonable certainty. And what's reasonable will be determined in the context of your business approach to risk, the resources that are at your disposal, cost considerations, and all of those good things. But the key here is that you must obtain reasonable certainty. Okay, so specifically, for instance, with regards to address verification, people who are in retail are at a disadvantage, because they have to obtain some external verification of a client address, even if they only deal with that client once, who comes in, buys a car or something like that. In financial services, and I think it's perhaps a suitable quid pro quo for the fact that people in financial services have been burdened by really heavy compliance for a really, really long time, is that you have the FASE Act, which compels you to meet with your client on a regular basis. It's an annual or quarterly or whatever the case. So you are in the best position to verify that the client lives where the client lives. And even if you can't obtain any other evidence, you could make a little note yourself, to say, I visited client X at what he claims to be his home. Eventually, the dogs didn't bark excessively, and eventually the children warmed towards him. Things like that, and I'm thereby reasonably satisfied that this is where he lives. So you've got lots of leeway in terms of that. All right, so also something that's a little bit problematic is that the Act, giving us the context and the framework, is not very explicit in what it wants you to do. It is quite explicit in terms of establishing and verifying identity. It is quite explicit in terms of establishing and verifying address. It is extremely explicit in terms of screening your client against certain, and I'm going to come back to that, but against certain terrorist lists and so on. But when we get to what we regard to be the remaining two main risk categories of customer due diligence. So think of it as you will, that you have 5 risk categories on a horizontal line. Okay, so we've dealt with identity. I'm going to get back to some of them have subcategories. So identity will have a number of subcategories, address and so on, screening. And the remaining 2 are not ones where you can pinpoint in the act where it says do this. The one of those main risk categories is the risk inherent in your own products and services as an accountable institution for the likelihood and the suitability of your products and services that they may be abused by a money launderer or a terror financier. Attorney's trust accounts, nominee accounts, where the principle of the undisclosed principal applies, where you don't necessarily need to know the name of the person whose assets you hold, and so on. So there are very many of those things that you won't find neatly categorized in the Act. You've got to go and look. So in Section 42, it makes an oblique reference to products and services, and then in a public compliance communication, it expands on that a little bit. And then the last category of customer due diligence, I beg your pardon, is what I refer to as heightened risk indicators, which is a combination of all of these other things. So for instance, which industry does your client hail from? You can even go in terms of geography to break it down, not only to countries. Clearly, if your client hails from a grey listed country, as we've said before, you have to attribute a higher risk to that client because the regime may not be as robust, something like that. But even in South Africa, you may elect, if someone lives near a border to a national park or a game reserve, the likelihood of poaching and that kind of thing will play a different part, will collect or you will attribute a higher risk to that. So you've got to really give careful consideration to all of those aspects. A fortunate consequence of the risk-based approach, and in fact it is encouraged by the Financial Intelligence Centre, is where possible, because they are cognizant of the cost and the time implications and the drain on your resources. They said, where possible and suitable in the context of your business, you are able to rely on electronic verifications. So typically under identity, if you don't meet the client face to face, if you are not the person to make the copy of the client's ID, or perhaps in respect of international clients, to make a copy of the client's passport, okay, then you can you can employ some kind of a system to interrogate the Department of Home Affairs for you. If their portal is up and running, these days it does tend to be a little bit wobbly. I think partly because the demand for that verification service has grown so enormously. So you can rely on that. You can, for instance, interrogate various credit databases if you wanted to see when last some other institution had verified or accepted your client's credentials and stuff like that. So you can do all of those, and you can do exactly the same in respect of address and things like that. What I do recommend, though, is when you rely on electronic verification, that you adopt a graded approach to risk, that the older that information is, the higher the risk becomes, until at some point it exceeds your appetite or your tolerance for risk. And then you say, for instance, I'll take someone else's say-so up to 6 months ago, but thereafter too many things could have happened and I lose the reasonable aspect of the certainty, so we want to look for something else. So that's all part and parcel. It remains quite a fluid thing. But in essence, what customer due diligence is you're creating a picture, an electronic risk matrix. So you've got those 5 main categories of risk, and then under identity you may choose to say the type of identity document, okay, poses a risk for the ease with which that document may be falsified, or the jurisdiction from which that document comes, or something like that. You will definitely have to look to see whether your client is a politically exposed person. Now, as I said earlier, the jury is out whether you have to actually spend money to do screenings and scans and pick up adverse media scans at this stage. The public compliance communication urges you strongly to critically look at all information. So I don't know if it's all available information or information which may become available, or whether it's just at your client's information. That is entirely up to you to decide in your RMCP how you want to do that. You will certainly look at the country of domicile of your client, and even if your client is a juristic entity, you will also look at how transparent those entities are by reference to directors, owners, people who influence, control, ultimate beneficial owners, signatories, those kinds of things, and then apply different risk ratings to each of those. So geography we've already spoken about. I'm not going to dwell on that again. I'll talk briefly about screening. Screening in terms of the FICA is restricted to 2 sets of lists only. There are many other lists which you can interrogate if you want to. I talk here only about the lists strictly prescribed. So there is a set of lists of, let's call them terrorists. They were previously known as the ISIL lists. They are issued and maintained by the United Nations Security Council. And there is a link, and you can download the list on a daily basis if you want to, and so on. It is absolutely forbidden to do business with a person whose name appears on that list. So, and if you do, as I said earlier, also you'll be prosecuted under Poctatara. So that's a life imprisonment kind of thing. Better you check. So and the FIC have issued requirements for the frequency of the checking, which I'll come back to now. And then the second set of lists is the list of so-called target persons against whom targeted financial sanctions have been imposed. My reading of that requirement is that not that there is an absolute prohibition to do business with them, but that you have to be familiar with the extent and the nature of the sanctions, and you must still report it to the FIC, but you may continue to do business provided that you yourself don't breach those sanctions. So that it's a distinction in practice that the majority of our clients find to make, and they simply adopt the rule to say, if you're one or the other, then we're not going to do business with you, and we're going to report. The screening requirement is quite onerous because you've got to screen when you onload or upload a client. Because on board. I've got the software, so I'm just upload. So when you onboard the client, then you have an obligation, whilst you're still engaged in a business relationship with that client, to maintain that information. So all the information on which you have calculated the client's risk score, okay, that is subject to change. You have to continuously update, and you have to set frequencies with which you will update, depending on whether your client is a low, medium, or a high-risk client. So for instance, typically you would say, if I have a high-risk client, I may want to re-verify all the information once a year, once 2 years for medium, and once every 3 years for low-risk clients, something like that. But then most recently, a requirement issued by the FIC that you must also screen every client each time that the lists change, because the lists get updated. I mean, they're not static. You have, the only way that you can actually do that is you either have some system that will alert you when there's a change to the list, or you simply have to screen on a daily basis. It's one of the two. If you don't otherwise know that the lists have changed, then how will you comply with that requirement? So it is a very onerous compliance requirement, but it's there. Okay, so now you've taken account of all of those factors. You've attributed different risk ratings to all of those factors. You may even, in order to complete your electronic matrix, you may even distinguish in terms of the relative weighting that you want to attribute to some of those criteria vis-a-vis the others. Personally, by way of example, I would attribute a higher weighting to the client's identity than knowing where the client lives. Because once I have the identity and I know that the identity is true, I can always find that person. But address in itself, so you can play around with those weightings in order to tailor-make a proper risk calculation methodology for your business. And once you've done that, and you've put everything away, the FIC will arrive at your doorstep and they will ask you to produce your risk report, and they will then see whether that risk report has been updated because of the ongoing maintenance obligation. And you're home free. So.
Is it true that the longer you've had a person as a client, the easier it gets to do the customer due diligence? Or do you think it gets harder? It's probably easier to see a red flag in some cases. How do you see that?
Yeah, again, I think it's a double-edged sword. Our natural inclination would be to say, as many clients do say, but I've known that person for years. I know he's not a PEP. Why should I screen to see if it's a politically influential person and that kind of thing? But your client's status will change. And sometimes the clients are better informed than you are, and they want to hide things from you. So familiarity breeds contempt, that kind of thing. It's just something, but let's be realistic and let's be practical. If I've known someone for 20 years, I will be able to intuit, okay? As long as I don't forsake or neglect the documentary evidence that this is what I've done, I'll be okay. You don't have to, we're not going to hunt communists out from behind every bush as they did in the 1970s and things. So yeah, we're fine.
Fantastic. I'm exhausted just listening to this whole topic of customer due diligence, but certainly something that's evolved over the last few years, and this is never going to go away. Ongoing process, so very onerous. So again, I cannot see how you can individually keep tabs on everything. So the use of technology must assist every accountable institution. I cannot see, it's a full-time job to do a day-to-day checking on all of these things. So thank you very much. Very, very insightful discussion.